They looked at her skin color and assumed she was nobody. They looked at her ticket and decided it didn't matter. When senior flight attendant Mark Sterling forced a quiet woman out of her first-class seat to make room for a wealthy donor's son, he thought he was just following the unspoken rules of the elite. He thought he had the power. He was wrong. He didn't know that the woman he was humiliating wasn't just a passenger. She was the newly appointed director of the Federal Aviation Administration. And by the time the plane landed, Mark wouldn't just lose his job, he would lose his pension, his reputation, and his freedom. This is the story of the most satisfying karma in aviation history. The air inside the cabin of Flight 882, bound from JFK to London Heathrow, smelled of expensive leather and pressurized oxygen. It was the smell of exclusivity. Dr. Alana Vance adjusted the blazer of her charcoal pantsuit and took a sip of the sparkling water the junior flight attendant had placed on her armrest. She sat in seat 1A. It wasn't a seat she had begged for, and it wasn't an upgrade she had lucked into. She had purchased it full price, 3 weeks in advance, using her personal card. Alana was tired. It had been a grueling week in Washington, D.C., testifying before Senate subcommittees regarding aviation safety protocols and budget allocations. As the first black woman to hold the interim, and likely soon to be permanent, title of Director of the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, the microscope on her was intense. Every move she made was scrutinized. Every policy she drafted was dissected. She just wanted to sleep. 7 hours of silence. That was the plan. She pulled a file folder out of her bag, labeled only with a generic Aviation Logistics sticker to avoid drawing attention, and began to read. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice was oily, polite on the surface, but laced with an underlying impatience. Alana looked up. Standing over her was the senior purser. His name tag read Mark Sterling. He was a man in his late 30s with a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating blue eyes. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid. "Yes?" Alana asked, her voice calm. "I'm afraid there has been a bit of an administrative error regarding the seating chart for this evening's flight," Mark said. He didn't make eye contact. He was looking past her, toward the boarding door. "It seems seat 1A was double-booked due to a computer glitch. We're going to need you to gather your things." Alana frowned slightly. "Double-booked? I checked in online 24 hours ago. I have my boarding pass right here on my phone. It says 1A. "I understand that," Mark said, his tone shifting from customer service to condescension. "But the system has flagged this seat for a priority global services member. It's a tier above yours, I'm afraid. We have a seat available for you in the main cabin. Row 34. It's an aisle seat." Alana paused. She knew the regulations. She knew the contract of carriage inside and out. She had literally helped revise the federal guidelines on involuntary bumping 3 months ago. "Mr. Sterling," Alana said, keeping her voice low so as not to disturb the other first-class passengers who were settling in. "Involuntary bumping usually requires the airline to ask for volunteers first, offering compensation. Have you done that?" Mark chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "We aren't bumping you from the flight, ma'am, just relocating you. The aircraft is full. This is the only solution. Now, if you could please hurry. We have a VIP boarding in 2 minutes, and I need this seat cleared." "I paid for first class," Alana stated firmly. "If there is a glitch, surely the person who hasn't boarded yet is the one who should be accommodated elsewhere. I am already seated." Mark leaned in closer. The smell of strong coffee and stale mints invaded Alana's personal space. "Look," he whispered, dropping the polite facade entirely. We both know how this works. The gentleman coming on board contributes millions to this airline. You're just a passenger. Don't make this difficult. You don't want to be the person who delays the flight for everyone else, do you?" Alana stared at him. She saw it then. The microaggression. The assumption that she was just a passenger. He looked at her crisp suit, her polished appearance, and he didn't see a high-ranking government official. He saw a black woman in a seat he felt she didn't deserve, blocking a valuable white man. "I am not moving," Alana said. Mark straightened up, his face hardening. "I was hoping you'd be cooperative. I really don't want to have to call the Port Authority police to have you escorted off the plane as a security risk." Alana's eyebrows shot up. "A security risk for sitting in my assigned seat? Disobeying a flight crew member's instructions is a federal offense," Mark recited, the threat gleaming in his eyes. "I can declare you unruly. You'll be placed on the no-fly list. Is this seat worth never flying again?" The cabin had gone quiet. In seat 2A, a businessman pretended to read his newspaper. In 1F, a socialite was peering over her sunglasses, watching the drama unfold with amusement. Alana's mind raced. She was the director of the FAA. If she caused a scene, if the police dragged her off, the headlines wouldn't be "FAA Director, Stand Her Ground." They would be "Government Official Belligerent on Flight." The optics would be terrible. Her confirmation hearing was in 2 weeks. She couldn't afford a scandal, even if she was in the right. Mark Sterling knew he had won. He tapped his foot impatiently. "Fine," Alana said. Her voice was ice. "I will move." "Excellent choice," Mark smirked. "Sarah will escort you to the back." Alana stood up. She slowly gathered her bag and her leather portfolio. She pulled out her phone and, with a practiced sleight of hand, snapped a clear photo of Mark's ID badge and the time on her screen. "I will need a refund for the price difference," Alana said. "Customer service will handle that upon landing." Mark waved her off, turning his back to greet a man entering the plane. "Ah, Mr. Kensington. Welcome aboard. So sorry for the delay. We were just clearing out the rubbish." Alana froze for a split second. Rubbish. She looked at the VIP. Mr. Kensington, Bryce Kensington, judging by the luggage tag, was a man in his mid-20s wearing a hoodie that probably cost more than a Honda Civic. He looked hungover. He didn't even thank Mark. He just threw his bag into the overhead bin and collapsed into seat 1A, Alana's seat. "Whatever, just get me a scotch," Bryce grunted. "Right away, Mr. Kensington," Mark beamed, fawning over him. Alana felt a hand on her elbow. It was Sarah, the junior flight attendant. Sarah looked mortified. "I am so sorry, Ma'am," she whispered as she guided Alana toward the curtain dividing the classes. "I told him not to. He wouldn't listen." "It's not your fault, Sarah," Alana said softly. "What is Mr. Sterling's employee number?" Sarah hesitated, looking back at the curtain. "It's, strictly speaking, I can't." "It's okay," Alana said. "I already have it." The walk to the back of the plane felt like a mile. They passed through business class, then premium economy, and finally into the main cabin. It was packed. Babies were crying. People were wrestling for overhead space. "Here we are," Sarah said, pointing to seat 34C. It was right next to the lavatory. The smell of chemicals was faint but present. The seat didn't recline. It was locked upright because of the exit row behind it. Alana sat down. Her knees brushed against the seat in front of her. To her left was a teenager with headphones blasting music so loud she could hear the lyrics. To her right, the aisle where carts would soon be slamming into her shoulder. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes. She wasn't angry anymore. Anger was a hot, messy emotion. What Alana felt now was a cold, calculating resolve. She pulled out her phone. The plane hadn't pushed back yet. She still had a signal. She opened her secure messaging app. She scrolled past Secretary of Transportation and White House Liaison until she found a contact named David Ross, FAA Chief Counsel. She typed a message. "David, I need the full audit history, safety violation record, and crew complaints for Horizon Air, specifically for a senior purser named Mark Sterling. Also, pull the flight manifest for Flight 882 out of JFK. I want to know exactly who Bryce Kensington is and why he displaced a confirmed passenger. Do it now. I'm currently in row 34. 3 dots appeared instantly. Row 34. You? Director, are you joking? I wish I was. Get the files and alert the ground team in London. I want a ramp inspection ready when we touch down. Copy that. What about the marshal? Alana looked around. 2 rows ahead, in 32B, sat a man in a nondescript flannel shirt reading a fishing magazine. He had boarded early. He hadn't looked at her, but she knew who he was. Agent Miller. Federal Air Marshal. He was assigned to this flight not because of her, but as standard rotation. He likely had no idea the director of the FAA was sitting 20 feet behind him, being treated like cattle. Leave the marshal out of it for now, Alana typed. Let's see how deep Mr. Sterling digs his own grave. The plane jolted. They were pushing back. Mark's voice came over the intercom, smooth and authoritative. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. Our #1 priority is your safety and comfort. We ask that you treat your flight crew with respect. Alana smirked. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small black notebook. She opened it to a fresh page and wrote, Violation 1. Discriminatory displacement. Violation 2. Failure to follow Contract of Carriage Article 4. Violation 3. She had a feeling the list was going to get much longer. 2 hours into the flight, the cabin lights had been dimmed to a soft, sleepy blue. But inside Alana Vance's mind, the lights were blazing bright. The service in the main cabin was frantic. With a full flight and a short staffing roster, Alana noted they were flying with the minimum required crew of 8 for this aircraft type, a Boeing 777-200. The flight attendants were exhausted. Sarah, the young woman who had apologized to Alana earlier, was sprinting up and down the aisle, sweat beading on her forehead. Mark Sterling, however, was nowhere to be seen in economy. As the senior purser, he largely confined himself to the premium cabins, only descending to the lower decks to bark orders at the junior crew or to retrieve supplies that were stocked in the rear galleys. Alana's stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten since her morning briefing at the Department of Transportation. "Chicken or pasta?" Sarah asked, her voice hoarse. She had reached row 34. "Chicken, please," Alana said. Sarah opened the cart drawer and sighed. "I'm so sorry. We're out of chicken. It's just the pasta left. It's a mushroom cream sauce." Alana was allergic to mushrooms. "That's fine," Alana said, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "I'll just have the bread roll and some water. Do you have any of the fruit plates left?" Sarah checked. "No, Mum. Those were all allocated to premium economy." "It's okay, Sarah. Don't worry about it." As Alana nibbled on a dry, cold bread roll, she heard raucous laughter drifting from the front of the plane. The curtain separating premium economy from business and business from first was not soundproof. She needed to use the restroom. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. The aisle was blocked by the service cart, so she had to wait. While standing, she had a clear line of sight through the parted curtains all the way to the front galley. What she saw made her blood run cold. Mark Sterling was standing in the galley, holding a bottle of Dom Perignon. Leaning against the galley counter, swaying visibly, was Bryce Kensington, the VIP from seat 1A. The seatbelt sign was currently on due to light chop over the Atlantic, yet here was a passenger out of his seat, and the senior purser was not only allowing it, but pouring him another drink. Alana pulled out her phone. She zoomed in. Click. Photo 3. Senior purser serving alcohol to a standing passenger during active seatbelt sign. Violation of FAA 121.575, serving alcohol to an intoxicated person, and FAA 121.317, non-compliance with signs, placards. Bryce slapped Mark on the shoulder, laughing loudly enough that heads turned in row 10. "You're the man, Mark. The man. That view from 1A is sweet. Way better than the back of the bus, right?" "Only the best for the Kensington family," Mark replied, his voice carrying that practiced, obsequious tone he reserved for the wealthy. Alana sat back down as the cart moved. She opened her notebook again. The list of infractions was growing from a disciplinary hearing into a license revocation event. Beside her, the teenager took off his headphones. "Man, that guy up front is loud," he muttered. "He certainly is," Alana replied. "I asked for a second Coke earlier, and that dude, the head waiter guy, he told me supplies are limited. But that guy up front is chugging champagne like water." "It's called resource mismanagement," Alana said, more to herself than the boy, "and it's about to be corrected." Suddenly, a chime echoed through the cabin. Bing bong. It was the call button from row 35, directly behind Alana. An elderly woman, Mrs. Higgins, Alana had learned her name when helping her stow her cane, was coughing. It was a dry, hacking cough. 5 minutes passed. No one came. The chime rang again. Bing bong. Sarah was at the far front of the economy section. The other attendants were busy in the rear galley. Mark Sterling was the closest crew member, walking briskly down the aisle carrying a fresh bottle of wine for the front. He walked right past row 35. "Excuse me," Alana said, her voice projecting clearly. She reached out, not touching him, but blocking his path with her hand raised. "Sir?" Mark stopped. He looked down at Alana with profound irritation. "I am in the middle of a service, ma'am. Lower your hand." "Mrs. Higgins behind me has rung her call bell twice. She is in distress," Alana said calmly. "She needs water." Mark glanced at the elderly woman, who was wheezing slightly. "Everyone needs water. The cart will be around for the second service in an hour. I cannot stop for every single request." "She is 80 years old and coughing," Alana said, her tone sharpening. "You are holding a bottle of water in your other hand. Give it to her." Mark looked at the bottle of Evian he was carrying, premium water meant for first class. Then he looked at Alana. The power struggle was palpable. To give in to her was to lose face. "This is reserved stock," Mark sneered. "I'll send Sarah back when she's free." He turned on his heel and marched away. Alana didn't hesitate. She unbuckled, grabbed her own unopened bottle of Dasani, the one she had bought at the terminal for $6, and turned around. She handed it to Mrs. Higgins. "Here, ma'am. Drink this." "Oh, bless you, dear," Mrs. Higgins gasped, her hands shaking as she took the bottle. He's a nasty one, isn't he?" "He's a liability," Alana corrected. Alana returned to her seat. Her phone buzzed. It was David Ross, her chief counsel. "We have the manifest. Bryce Kensington, son of Roger Kensington, CEO of Kensington Defense Systems. They just signed a massive freight contract with the airline. That explains the VIP treatment. But here's the kicker. Bryce is currently on probation for a DUI in Miami. If he's intoxicated on a plane, that's a violation of his parole." Alana typed back. "He's beyond intoxicated. He's stumbling, and the purser is feeding him more. Contact the Heathrow station manager. I want Port Authority at the gate. Not for me. For them." Understood. Also, Alana, I pulled Mark Sterling's file. You're not the first. He has 3 discrimination complaints in the last 5 years, all settled by the airline with NDAs. He's a protected species because he manages the VIP roster. Alana's eyes narrowed. Not anymore. The predator is about to become the prey. The atmosphere on the plane shifted 3 hours later. The smooth hum of the engines was interrupted by a sudden, violent jolt. Coffee cups slid off trays. A few passengers screamed, "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts immediately. We are encountering some unexpected turbulence," the first officer announced. The plane dipped again, a stomach-churning drop of maybe 200 feet. It was moderate turbulence, nothing Alana hadn't flown through 100 times, but for nervous flyers it was terrifying. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a stern ping. Alana checked Mrs. Higgins. The older woman was gripping her armrests, eyes squeezed shut. Alana reached through the gap in the seats and squeezed her hand. "It's okay. Just choppy air. The structure of this plane can handle 10 times this stress." But not everyone was handling it well. Up in first class, Bryce Kensington was bored and drunk, and now seemingly immune to the laws of physics. Alana saw movement. Bryce had stumbled out of first class. He pushed through the curtain into economy. He was holding a half-empty glass of amber liquid. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top, his face flushed red. Where's the bathroom?" he slurred, swaying dangerously as the plane shook. He grabbed the headrest of seat 32C to steady himself, yanking the hair of the woman sitting there. She yelped. "Hey, watch it!" the woman's husband shouted. "Relax, peasant!" Bryce spat, spilling some of his drink on the floor. "I'm just looking for a pisser that isn't occupied." Sarah, the flight attendant, came running up the aisle, balancing herself against the overhead bins. Sir, you need to sit down immediately. The turbulence is dangerous." "I need to pee," Bryce yelled, shoving Sarah backward. A collective gasp went through the cabin, assaulting a crew member. That was the line. Sarah stumbled but caught herself. She looked terrified. She was half Bryce's size. "Sir, please," Sarah pleaded. "Go back to your seat." "No!" Bryce roared. He looked around, his eyes glazing over. He spotted Alana. He squinted. "Hey! You're the one who was in my seat. You stole my seat." The logic was drunken and inverted, but his aggression was real. He stepped toward row 34. "You tried to take what's mine," Bryce mumbled, raising his glass as if to throw it. Alana unbuckled her seatbelt. She didn't stand up fully, but she shifted to the edge of her seat, her body coiling like a spring. She had taken self-defense courses mandated for high-level federal employees. But before Bryce could take another step, Mark Sterling appeared. He rushed down the aisle, but instead of restraining the drunk passenger who had just shoved his colleague, Mark went straight for damage control. The wrong kind. Mr. Kensington, please," Mark soothed, putting a hand on Bryce's back. "Come with me. Let's get you back to the front. These people, they don't understand." "She stole my seat," Bryce pointed at Alana. Mark turned his gaze to Alana. His eyes were venomous. He needed a scapegoat. He needed to de-escalate Bryce by validating his delusion. "I know, sir. It's unacceptable," Mark said, loud enough for the surrounding rows to hear. He looked at Alana. "Ma'am, you are agitating the VIP. I need you to lower your window shade and stop making eye contact. You are causing a disturbance." The audacity was so thick it was suffocating. Alana stood up. "Sit down," Mark barked, "or I will have you restrained." "Mr. Sterling," Alana said, her voice projecting with the authority of a courtroom gavel. "You have a passenger who is intoxicated, has assaulted a crew member, and is standing during severe turbulence. By failing to restrain him and by serving him alcohol after he was visibly impaired, you are in direct violation of CFR 100.21, about 75. You are legally required to cut him off and secure the cabin. Mark froze. The specific citation of the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, hit him like a slap, but his arrogance was a fortress. You think because you know a few numbers you can tell me how to run my aircraft? Mark shouted, stepping into Alana's personal space. I am the senior purser. I am the authority here. You are a disruptive passenger in economy class. Now sit down and shut up, or I will zip-tie you to that seat myself. He reached for the plastic flex cuffs on his belt. The cabin was silent. The turbulence shook the plane, but the tension inside was far more volatile. Don't touch her. The voice came from row 32. The man in the flannel shirt, Agent Miller, stood up. He didn't sway with the turbulence. He stood like a statue. In his hand, he held a small leather wallet, flipped open to reveal a gold badge and a photo ID. Federal Air Marshal, Miller stated calmly. Mr. Sterling, step away from the passenger. Mark blinked, looking from Miller to Alana. She's causing a riot. She's harassing Mr. Kensington. I've been watching for 4 hours, Miller said, stepping into the aisle, effectively placing himself between Alana and Mark. Mr. Kensington is drunk and disorderly. He assaulted your colleague, Sarah. And you just threatened a passenger for citing federal safety regulations. I didn't. It's a misunderstanding, Mark stammered, the color draining from his face. It's not a misunderstanding, Alana said. She stepped out into the aisle, standing next to the marshal. She smoothed her blazer. She looked Mark dead in the eye. Agent Miller, Alana said, acknowledging the marshal. Thank you for the assist. I believe I can take it from here regarding the administrative violations. Mark looked at her, confused. Who do you think you are? Alana reached into her pocket. She didn't pull out a phone this time. She pulled out her wallet. She flipped it open. It wasn't just a badge. It was the credentials of the United States Department of Transportation. It bore the seal of the United States government and the title Administrator, Federal Aviation Administration. I am Dr. Alana Vance, she said, her voice steady, ringing through the silent cabin. I am the director of the FAA. I am the person who signs your airline's operating certificate. I am the person who writes the regulations you have spent the last 4 hours breaking. Mark Sterling's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes went to the badge, then to her face, then back to the badge. And Mr. Sterling, Alana continued, taking a step closer, you have just failed your in-flight inspection. For 10 seconds, the only sound in the cabin of Flight 882 was the rushing wind outside the fuselage and the heavy breathing of Mark Sterling. He looked at the badge in Alana's hand as if it were a radioactive isotope. His brain, usually so quick to find excuses or policy loopholes, had ground to a complete halt. Director of the FAA. The words bounced around his skull. He hadn't just insulted a passenger, he had insulted the woman who effectively owned the sky. Dr. Vance, Mark croaked, his throat suddenly dry as sand. I had no idea. The manifest. It didn't say. The manifest lists me as a passenger, Alana said, her voice cool and dangerously calm. She pocketed her credentials but didn't break eye contact. My title is irrelevant to my rights as a paying customer, Mr. Sterling, but my title is very relevant to what happens to you next. Beside them, Bryce Kensington was still swaying, blinking confusedly. What's going on? Who is she? Why is the Fed here? Mr. Kensington, Agent Miller said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You are under arrest for interference with a flight crew and assault. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. "You can't touch me," Bryce slurred, swinging a lazy fist at the marshal. It was a mistake. With a fluid motion, Miller spun Bryce around, driving his face into the cushioned headrest of seat 34C. The zip-zip sound of flex cuffs tightening echoed through the silent cabin. "Ow, my dad is going to—" "Your dad isn't here," Miller said, shoving Bryce down into the empty aisle seat. "Sit, stay. If you speak again, I will gag you." With the physical threat neutralized, the attention snapped back to Mark. He was trembling. He looked at Alana, his hands raised in a pleading gesture. "Dr. Vanners, please. Let's talk about this in the galley. I can explain. The pressure from corporate to accommodate VIPs, you know how it is. I was just following the culture of the 'do not blame' culture for your lack of integrity." Alana cut him off. "You made a choice. You chose to discriminate. You chose to endanger this aircraft by serving an intoxicated passenger, and you chose to threaten me with false arrest." Alana turned to Sarah, the junior flight attendant who was still clutching her arm where Bryce had shoved her. Sarah looked terrified that she was about to be swept up in the disciplinary action. "Sarah," Alana said, her voice softening instantly, "are you injured?" I'm okay, Mom. Just bruised," Sarah whispered. "Good. You followed protocol," Alana stated loud enough for the passengers nearby to hear. "You attempted to de-escalate. You cut off the passenger. You did your job. I will be noting that in my report. You have nothing to fear." Sarah exhaled, a sob escaping her throat. "Thank you, Mom." "Now," Alana turned back to Mark, "go tell the captain I need to speak with him, immediately, on the interphone." Mark didn't move. He was paralyzed. "Go!" Agent Miller barked. Mark scrambled backward, stumbling over his own feet as he retreated up the aisle toward the cockpit, his facade of first-class superiority completely shattered. Alana turned to the passengers in economy. They were staring at her with wide eyes. The teenager next to her took off his headphones completely. "Sorry for the disruption, everyone," Alana said simply. "We'll be landing soon." A slow clap started from row 36. Then Mrs. Higgins joined in. Then the businessman in the aisle. Within moments, the entire economy cabin was applauding. It wasn't just for Alana. It was the release of tension, the collective satisfaction of seeing a bully put in his place. Alana gave a small, tight nod. She wasn't smiling. This wasn't a victory lap. It was a crime scene investigation. She walked to the front galley. Mark was holding the interphone receiver, his hand shaking so hard the cord was vibrating. He handed it to her, like a surrender weapon. "This is Captain Henderson," the voice on the other end said, sounding tense. "Who is this?" "Captain, this is Dr. Alana Vance, FAA Administrator," Alana said firmly. "I am currently aboard your aircraft." There was a long pause. "Dr. Vance? I was told there was a disturbance in the back. I didn't realize. My first officer is looking up your verification code now." "Code Alpha Victor 79er." Alana recited her clearance code from memory. "Captain, we have a Level 2 security threat that has been neutralized by the Air Marshal. However, the safety of this flight was compromised by your senior purser. I am advising you to request police presence at the gate upon arrival at Heathrow, specifically the Metropolitan Police Aviation Policing Command." "Understood, Dr. Vance." The captain's voice shifted from confused to military-grade professional. He knew that if the FAA director was calling the shots, his career depended on total cooperation. "I will radio Heathrow Tower. We are starting our descent in 20 minutes. Do you require anything else?" "Yes," Alana said, glancing at Mark, who was cowering in the corner of the galley near the coffee makers. "I want the cockpit voice recorder data preserved immediately upon engine shutdown. Do not let it loop. And Captain, Mr. Sterling is relieved of duty effective immediately. He is to sit in the jump seat and touch nothing. Sarah is now the acting purser. Copy that. Sterling is relieved. Henderson out. Alana hung up the phone. She looked at Mark. Sit. She pointed to the crew jump seat by the door. Mark sat. He looked small. The arrogance that had filled the cabin 4 hours ago had evaporated, leaving behind a middle-aged man who realized he had just thrown away a 20-year career for a drunk kid in a hoodie. Dr. Vance, Mark whispered, tears welling in his eyes. I have a mortgage. My daughter starts college next year. Please. Alana looked at him, her expression unreadable. You should have thought about your daughter before you humiliated a woman old enough to be your mother in row 35. You should have thought about your mortgage before you broke federal safety laws. The consequences, Mr. Sterling, are yours alone. She turned and walked back to economy. She wouldn't sit in first class. She finished the flight in seat 34C, right where he had put her. The landing at London Heathrow was smooth, the wheels kissing the tarmac under grey, rainy skies. But inside the plane, the atmosphere was heavy. As the aircraft taxied to Terminal 5, the usual chime indicating safe to use mobile phones rang out. Usually, this was the moment passengers rushed to check texts. Today, nobody moved. They were waiting for the finale. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain's voice came over the PA, sounding grave. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have authorities boarding the aircraft to remove a passenger. Please stay clear of the aisle. The plane bumped to a halt at the gate. The seatbelt sign stayed on. Through the window, Alana could see the flashing blue lights of police vehicles reflecting on the wet pavement. A jet bridge extended and latched onto the fuselage with a thud. The boarding door opened. Mark Sterling, strapped into his jump seat, couldn't hide. He was the first thing the boarding party saw. 2 officers from the Metropolitan Police entered, wearing high-visibility jackets. Behind them was a stern-looking woman in a sharp navy suit, Eleanor Rostova, the Horizon Air Station manager for London. And behind her, a man carrying a briefcase with the logo of the UK Civil Aviation Authority, CAA. Where is the suspect? The lead officer asked. Agent Miller stood up in row 34. Here, 1 male, subdued. The officers marched down the aisle. Bryce Kensington had sobered up enough to realize he was in trouble, but he was still arrogant. Do you know who my father is? This is kidnapping. I want my lawyer. You'll have plenty of time for lawyers at the station. Mate, the officer said, hauling Bryce out of the seat. They dragged him down the aisle. As he passed Alana, he glared at her. You ruined my trip. You ruined it yourself, Alana said calmly. As Bryce was hauled off, the station manager, Elena Rostova, spotted Alana. She hurried down the aisle, her face pale. She had clearly received the message from headquarters while the plane was in the air. Dr. Vance, Elena gasped, extending a hand. I am mortified. The CEO has been trying to reach you for the last hour. We are fully prepared to offer you— I don't want vouchers, Miss Rostova, Alana said, standing up and straightening her suit. She picked up her bag. I want an audit. An audit? Yes, Alana said. She began to walk toward the front, Elena scrambling to keep up. I want the maintenance logs for this aircraft. I want the training records for this entire crew. And I want a full investigation into the VIP prioritization algorithm that flagged my seat for displacement. They reached the front galley. Mark Sterling was still sitting in the jump seat, looking like a ghost. The man from the UK CAA stepped forward. Dr. Vance, I'm Nigel Thorne, CAA liaison. We received your alert from Washington. We are ready to assist with the jurisdictional handover. Thank you, Nigel, Alana said. She pointed at Mark. This crew member, Mark Sterling, is to be removed from the flight manifest. He is not to work the return leg. In fact, I am flagging his certificate for immediate suspension, pending an inquiry under 49 U.S. Code, paragraph 709. Mark let out a sob. Ms. Rostova, please, it was a misunderstanding. Elena Rostova looked at Mark with cold fury. She knew exactly how much damage this man had just caused the airline. The stock price would likely dip by morning if this story leaked. Hand over your badge, Mark, Elena said quietly. Elena, Give me your badge, she snapped. With trembling hands, Mark unclipped his ID, the one that gave him access to secure areas, the one that let him travel the world. He handed it to her. Grab your personal belongings and escort yourself off the aircraft, Elena said. Security will meet you at the top of the jet bridge to escort you out of the terminal. You are suspended without pay, effective immediately. Mark stood up. He looked at the first-class cabin, the domain he had ruled like a petty tyrant for years. He looked at the empty champagne bottle on the counter. He looked at Alana. I'm sorry, he whispered. Apologies are for mistakes, Mr. Sterling, Alana said, finally looking him in the eye with the full weight of her office. What you did was a character flaw. Goodbye. Mark walked out of the plane, his shoulders slumped, carrying his small roller bag. He passed the first-class passengers, the wealthy elite he tried so hard to impress. They didn't look at him. They were looking at Alana with respect. Dr. Vance, Elena said, wiping sweat from her brow. We have a car waiting for you on the tarmac. VIP transport. We'll take you straight to your hotel. Alana looked at the exit. She was exhausted. Her back hurt from the economy seat. But she wasn't done. One moment, Alana said. She turned back to the main cabin. Sarah and the other flight attendants were huddled by the galley, looking anxious. Alana walked over to them. She reached into her bag and pulled out her personal business card. Heavy cardstock, gold-embossed seal. Sarah, she said, handing her the card. You were put in an impossible position today. If the airline tries to discipline you for what happened with Mr. Kensington, or if you face any retaliation for cooperating with my investigation, you call this number. Do you understand? Sarah took the card, her eyes wide. Yes, Mum. Thank you. And tell the rest of the crew, Alana said, raising her voice slightly so the pilots in the cockpit could hear. Safety is not negotiable, and neither is dignity. If you see something like this happen again, you speak up. The FAA has your back. She turned and walked off the plane, stepping onto the jet bridge. The cool London air hit her face. It smelled of jet fuel and rain. It smelled like justice. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, suffocating cascade of consequences that dismantled the lives of Mark Sterling and the Kensington family, piece by painful piece. 72 hours after Flight 882 landed, Mark sat in a sterile, windowless conference room at the Horizon Air corporate headquarters in London. Across the table sat the Vice President of In-Flight Operations, a representative from the Flight Attendants Union, and two federal investigators from the FAA's Office of Security and Hazardous Materials Safety. Mark had expected a reprimand. He had expected a suspension. He had even prepared a speech about his 20 years of flawless service. He never got to give it. Mr. Sterling, the VP began, sliding a thick file across the mahogany table. We have reviewed the cockpit voice recorder, the witness statements from 13 passengers, and the report filed by Federal Air Marshal Miller. We have also reviewed the video footage taken by Dr. Vance. I was under extreme pressure, Mark interrupted, his voice trembling. Mr. Kensington is a diamond-tier partner. I was trying to protect the airline's revenue. The union representative, usually a bulldog for crew rights, didn't even look at Mark. He kept his eyes on his notepad. That was the first sign that it was over. "You didn't protect anything, Mark," the VP said, his voice cold. "You exposed us to a federal investigation. As of this morning, Horizon Air has been slapped with a proposed civil penalty of $1.2 million for multiple violations of 14 CFR Part 121. And that's just the fine. The reputational damage is incalculable." The FAA investigator leaned forward. "Mr. Sterling, pursuant to 49 U.S. Code, paragraph 44709, we are issuing an emergency order of revocation for your certificate of demonstrated proficiency. You are permanently disqualified from performing safety-sensitive duties on any U.S. registered aircraft." Mark felt the blood drain from his face. "Permanently? But this is my life. I don't know how to do anything else." "You should have thought of that before you tried to intimidate the director of the FAA," the investigator said, closing his folder. "You are grounded, Mr. Sterling, forever." The meeting lasted 10 minutes. The security escort out of the building took 5. Mark stood on the sidewalk in the rain, holding a cardboard box containing a stapler, a coffee mug, and a photo of himself shaking hands with a celebrity from 10 years ago. He was 42 years old, and his career was dead. But the karma was far from finished. While Mark was losing his livelihood, the Kensingtons were losing their empire. Roger Kensington, Bryce's father, had built his defense contracting firm on the image of untouchable power. He believed he could make a few phone calls and bury the incident. He tried to call a senator he had donated to. He tried to call the Secretary of Transportation. Nobody picked up. Alana Vance had done more than just file a report. She had triggered a deep audit. 2 weeks later, Roger sat before a congressional oversight committee. The hearing was televised. Alana Vance sat in the gallery, watching silently. "Mr. Kensington," the committee chairwoman said, looking over her spectacles. "The investigation into the Flight 8082 incident has revealed a disturbing pattern. It appears your company has a history of billing travel expenses for your family's personal vacations as logistical reconnaissance for government contracts. That is fraud." "That's an accounting error," Roger shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. "It is a felony," the chairwoman corrected. "Effective immediately, the Department of Defense is suspending all active contracts with Kensington Defense Systems. Furthermore, the DOJ is opening a criminal probe into your billing practices." Roger slumped in his chair. In the span of a 20-minute hearing, the company's stock plummeted 40%. Billions of dollars in market cap evaporated. The board of directors forced Roger to resign the next morning to save the company. The man who thought he owned the world was fired by his own subordinates. And his son? Bryce Kensington didn't get the slap on the wrist his expensive lawyers promised. Because he had assaulted a crew member and interfered with a federal air marshal in international airspace, the case fell under federal jurisdiction. There were no plea deals. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly seen the viral video of Bryce screaming at Alana, was merciless. "Mr. Kensington," the judge said at the sentencing, "you treated a commercial airliner like your private playground and its passengers like your servants. You represent a danger to public safety." Bryce was sentenced to 24 months in a federal correctional facility in West Virginia. No parole, no first class, just a 688 cell and a metal toilet 6 months later. Winter had set in. In a drafty logistics warehouse in Newark, New Jersey, a man in a high-visibility orange vest was sweeping the concrete floor. Mark Sterling paused to wipe the grime off his forehead. His back ached. He was working the night shift at a freight forwarding center. He wasn't managing VIP lists anymore. He was managing pallets of frozen seafood. He had applied to Delta, United, American, even the budget carriers. But in the aviation industry, the PRIA background check system meant that his revocation was visible to every employer. He was blacklisted. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a notification from his bank. Insufficient funds. His wife had left him 2 months ago. She couldn't handle the shame, the downsizing, the loss of their status. Mark was living in a studio apartment above a garage. He took his break, sitting on a wooden pallet, eating a cold sandwich. He pulled out his cracked phone and saw a news alert. FAA Director Alana Vance flies inaugural Fair Skies route. Mark clicked the video. There she was. Alana Vance, standing at the gate at JFK. She looked radiant, confident, and powerful. Beside her stood Sarah, the young flight attendant Mark had bullied. Sarah was wearing a new uniform with gold stripes on the sleeve. She had been promoted to lead purser and was now the face of the airline's new Dignity in Travel training program. The reporter asked Alana a question. Director Vance, looking back at the incident on Flight 882, do you have any ill will toward the crew member who tried to remove you? Mark held his breath, staring at the tiny screen. Alana looked directly into the camera. Her expression wasn't angry. It was pitiful. No, Alana said softly. I don't feel ill will. I feel sadness. It's a tragedy when someone forgets their own humanity for a little bit of perceived power. I hope he finds peace, but he will never find it in the sky again. Mark turned off the phone. The silence of the warehouse pressed in on him. He had spent his whole career looking down on people in the back of the plane, thinking the curtain made him better than them. Now, he realized the truth. The curtain was just a piece of fabric. The class system was an illusion, and he was on the wrong side of the only line that mattered, the line between integrity and arrogance. "Hey, Sterling," the shift supervisor yelled from across the loading dock. "Stop playing on your phone and load the fish. Truck's waiting." "Yes, sir," Mark said. He stood up, grabbed his broom, and went back to work. Back at JFK, the boarding call for Flight 882 began. "We would like to welcome our first-class passengers," the gate agent announced. Alana Vance walked up to the scanner. Sarah was waiting there. "Good morning, Director," Sarah smiled, scanning her boarding pass. "Seat 1A is ready for you, and the sparkling water is already chilled." "Thank you, Sarah," Alana said. As she walked down the jet bridge, Alana didn't feel triumph. She felt relief. The system worked. It had taken a sledgehammer to fix it, but it worked. She stepped onto the plane. The air smelled fresh. The atmosphere was light. She sat in 1A, the seat she had fought for, not because it was comfortable, but because it was right. She buckled her seatbelt and looked out the window at the sprawling tarmac. The engines roared to life, a sound of limitless potential. Alana opened her file, ready to work. The turbulence was over. The sky was clear, and this time, nobody dared to ask her to move. This story is a brutal reminder that the higher you climb, the harder you fall if you forget who holds the ladder. Mark Sterling and Bryce Kensington thought their status made them untouchable. They thought the rules were for other people. But they learned the hard way that true power isn't about shouting the loudest or drinking the most expensive champagne. It's about knowing who you are and standing your ground with quiet dignity. Alana Vance didn't need to scream to win. She used the very laws Mark ignored to dismantle his life. It serves as a warning to everyone. Treat the janitor, the waiter, and the quiet woman in economy with the same respect you'd show a CEO. Because you never know when the person you're disrespecting is the one who signs your paycheck or signs your arrest warrant. I have to say, seeing Mark sweeping floors and Bryce in a cell is the definition of play stupid games, win stupid prizes. That was intensely satisfying, Do you think the punishment fit the crime? Was losing his entire career too harsh for Mark, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this saga of justice at 30,000 feet, please smash that like button to help the channel fly high. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.